On Christmas Eve, my own son looked me in the eye and told me I was no longer part of this family. Right there, over turkey, candles, and the table I built with my bare hands, he voted me out of my own life. That was the moment I realized the people I sacrificed everything for were ready to bury me alive. Before I tell you how this betrayal turned into the fight of my life, make sure you subscribe if you love powerful family drama stories, because this one will test every idea you have about loyalty, sacrifice, and justice. The china my wife Anna had chosen 25 years ago caught the light, and Daniel's wife, Laura, perched beside him like a news anchor about to break a story she'd been practicing in the mirror. Daniel lifted his glass. "Dad, we've talked this to death. You're not managing things anymore. For your safety, and for the good of the family, we've decided it's time for you to leave the house. We'll help you find something smaller." There it was. The hammer drop delivered with a practiced frown that made him look like a man doing the hard, right thing. He was 31, broad-shouldered, clean-shaven, wearing a winter blue sport coat he couldn't afford. Laura's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. My sister Carol shifted in her seat. The nieces stopped picking at their green beans. The television in the den murmured a football game to nobody. I didn't flinch. I stared at the turkey like it had a secret. Then I looked up slowly and took in the room piece by piece. The dent in the oak table from the time Daniel, at 8, crashed his Hot Wheels into my coffee mug. The tiny burn mark on the runner where Anna had set down a candle too close to the fabric, laughing as she blew it out. Ghosts of joy hovered everywhere, and now my son wanted to steam clean the past out of the walls. Laura placed a manicured hand on Daniel's sleeve. "He's not saying it right," she said to the room. "What he means is, we love Henry, but he gets confused. He forgets things." I kept my face neutral. "What's confused," I said, "is the notion that this house is somehow yours." Daniel's jaw flexed. He pulled a folded estimate from his pocket and tossed it onto the table like a warrant. "The roof, the floors, the furnace. You've put everything off. This place is falling apart. You couldn't even climb a ladder last summer. We're thinking modern, Dad. New floors, open concept, smart thermostat. It's time. You're stuck. Stuck." The words sank into the mashed potatoes like a knife. I lifted my water glass and took a sip. Across the table, my friend Jack, retired attorney, my fishing buddy, watched with the flat expression he used when juries lied to themselves. "Dan," Carol started, but he cut her off, voice growing. "He can't keep hoarding cash while we're drowning. We pay the bills, we pay the Wi-Fi." "You live here rent-free," I said quietly. "Wi-Fi is $16 a month after the promo. Don't inflate your sacrifices." Laura laughed once. "Rent-free? This place is a museum, Henry. We're doing you a favor." "A favor." I set my fork down, the metal ringing the plate. For a split second, the clang was the only sound in the room. Smells of sage and butter and pine needles swam around us, suddenly heavy as wet wool. I let the silence stretch until it got uncomfortable. Daniel couldn't stand a vacuum. He rushed into it. "You're not needed here anymore," he said. I looked at my son, the kid I'd taught to throw a spiral in the yard, whose science fair volcano I'd helped blow apart on purpose so he'd have a story. And I let the ache flare and fade. If I swung now, I'd miss. If I spoke now, I'd say things I couldn't unsay. So I breathed. I picked up my napkin and dabbed a perfectly dry spot on my lip because it gave my hands something to do. "Message received," I said. I slid my chair back. "Enjoy dinner." "Running away?" Daniel said, smirking. "Walking away," I corrected, and left the room as if I'd been planning to all along. The hallway air was cooler, quieter, honest. I closed the door gently and stood in the dim light. The house ticked and settled. This was the corridor where Anna had stood on tiptoe one slow June evening to kiss me after we signed the mortgage. Where Daniel had dragged a skateboard, leaving a long scratch I'd never buffed out because it was proof he'd been small once. In the bedroom, I sat on the cedar chest and stared at Anna's photograph. Summer hair, city park sun on her face. "You told me to do it for our boy," I whispered, and then I told the truth. I did. And it wrecked him. On the nightstand sat a spiral notebook with a blue cover. A month earlier, I'd started jotting things that didn't make sense. Laura's designer bags appearing when Daniel's job at the car dealership kept cutting hours. A second car payment. A line of credit I didn't recognize. I opened to the last page, wrote tonight's date, and, in block letters, the words, "They've decided." Then I underlined it and capped my pen. Outside, sleet started to ping against the window, tapping out the beginning of a countdown I felt in my chest. I wasn't confused. I wasn't lost. I felt sharper than I had in years. I stood, shrugged into my old field jacket, and walked back down the hall. As I passed the dining room, Daniel's voice floated after me, confident, performative. I smiled to myself. They thought they were writing my ending. They hadn't read what I kept in the garage. The garage smelled like oil and cedar dust. Against the back wall, under a drop cloth, sat the toolbox that had built half the repairs in this house. Inside it, not under the sockets and wrenches where any thief would look, but taped under the bottom tray, were documents that mattered. Not because I was paranoid, because I'd worked 40 years as a field engineer and knew that plans you don't keep close become plans other people edit. I slid the tray out, peeled the tape, and ran my fingers over the plastic sleeve. Deed, insurance, the revocable trust papers I'd drafted but never executed after Anna died because it felt too final. I tucked the sleeve into my jacket, locked the garage, and breathed in the cold so deep it bit my throat. In the living room, the tree glowed, and the twinkle lights on the porch cast moving gold across the snow. I picked up my keys, felt their weight, and without a word, drove into the city. On Lakeshore Drive, the water looked like iron. Chicago's skyline, all angles and teeth, rose ahead, and the sleet turned to snow. At a red light, I caught my reflection in the rear view. Older, yes, tired, sure, but eyes clear. I parked near Jack's condo and buzzed. He opened the door in a Santa sweatshirt with a scotch already poured. We didn't hug. We didn't need to. "You heard?" I said. "I heard enough," he said. "Come in. Let's get your life out of their hands." Jack's place smelled like books and lemon oil, and the kind of quiet you buy on purpose. He set a legal pad on the table and slid over a pen with good heft. "Say it exactly," he said. I did. Every word of it. The estimate pitched like a grenade. The vote, Laura's gentle voice when she used the word confused. I told him what I'd been noticing. The bags, the subscription boxes on the porch, a new gym membership that got used twice, the late notice for something addressed to Daniel that he'd shoved into the junk drawer. I told him about my notebook. Jack listened without interrupting, the way you listen to a ticking you hear in a wall. When I finished, he said, "We don't swing mad, we swing smart. Revocable living trust. Durable power of attorney. The one you appoint, not the one they take. New will. Lock down any joint accounts if they exist. And evidence, Henry. You were always good at building from the ground up. This is no different. We build your case. Evidence." The word sat right in my chest. I'd built bridges from nothing but paper lines on a survey. I could build this. On the drive home, my head filled with the steady hum that used to settle over me when a project went from chaos to blueprint. As the wipers beat, memories rose, uninvited and sharp. Daniel at 12, swearing he'd make varsity, so I paid for the summer camp out west. It was 103 degrees the day I put the Mustang up for sale, and a teenager with a ball cap backward paid me $7,000 cash and drove it away with a horn honk that sounded like goodbye. "Do it for our boy," Anna said. I did it so many times I lost count. We kept a glass jar labeled Montana on the counter the year Daniel wanted to see the Rockies. I filled it with quarters from my overtime lunches and dollars from extra weekend shifts. We went. He slept in the passenger seat from Des Moines to Billings, and I didn't mind. The next morning, the house was quiet, in the way empty rooms are loud. The first light got snagged in the icicles on the eaves. I brewed coffee that tasted like metal and walked the perimeter of my life. The front room with the west window where Anna had read on Sundays. The hall closet, top shelf, where I kept open boxes, tape, old tax returns. I pulled the junk drawer open in the kitchen and, like I knew I would, found a second late notice with Daniel's name on it, this one from a bank I didn't recognize. On the corkboard next to the fridge, the family calendar held a spine of appointments and scribbles. In Laura's handwriting, "Open house, Saturday, 1 to 3 p.m., ideas." A glossy flyer, kitchen remodel inspiration, hung by a magnet shaped like a pear. The first twist landed that afternoon. Carol called. She never called before 10. "Hank," she said, and used the nickname I'd had since high school. "You okay?" "I'm fine, Care." She exhaled through her nose. "I just got a message from Laura. She says you left the stove on twice this week, and she's worried. She mentioned guardianship papers, Hank. She says Daniel doesn't want to do it, but—" "She's seeding the ground," I said. "You know how people salt sidewalks before ice? It's like that." I could hear Carol pick at her thumbnail on the other end of the line. "Is she lying?" "I didn't leave the stove on." "Well," Carol said, "if they show up at church with this story, people will believe them." "People will believe what makes them feel like they're good people," I said, surprised at how even I sounded. "I can't fix that." After lunch, I pulled the banker's box from the hall closet and made a new label. Documentation. The trick with a project is to start with the parts that want to break. The weak joints, the mismeasured angles. I sorted. Bank statements, insurance, deed, the old trust papers from the garage. I made a list. Then I took a photo of the list and sent it to Jack. He replied with 3 words. "Proud of you." That evening, with the snow falling steadier, I drove to the lakefront and sat in the cab of my truck, listening to talk radio, because the voices kept me from picking at the scab. Laura's words crawled under my coat. Confused. Not managing. It wasn't new. The way she said it was new. Public, measured, pitying. That's how you move a crowd. I'd seen it in safety meetings when I needed the guys to wear harnesses. You don't shout, you reason, you paint a picture of the fall. The second twist came on a Wednesday. The locks were changed. I put my key into the front door, and it stopped a quarter turn in. The brass gleamed like a tooth that didn't belong. The wreath Anna had woven from grapevine hung slightly off-center, festive as ever, guarding a door that was no longer mine. I tested the back door, the garage. New deadbolts all around. My phone lit with a text from an unknown number. "For your safety, Henry, we've changed the locks. We'll let you in when we're home." I stared at the screen until my reflection blurred. Then I took a picture of the lock, the text thread, the porch, the front step I had poured myself, least expensive mix I could find, one July day before the Cubs game. I sent the photos to Jack with the caption, "Documented." And then, because I knew them, because I knew the kind of power people think they have when they can deny access, I didn't bang or argue or call. I got back in the truck, adjusted the seat, and drove to the bank. The branch manager was in her 40s with a bob and a bracelet that clicked gently when she typed. She recognized me as the guy who always deposited checks in person, even when the app was faster. She led me to a small office with a short, calming plant. We handled what needed handling. Next, I stopped at the credit union where Daniel had once begged me to co-sign a car note. He was 20 and headstrong and promised me he'd make every payment without a single reminder. He didn't. He missed 3 and asked me for help. I paid 1. I didn't co-sign again. At home, no, at the place I was now technically locked out of, I waited in the truck on the street. I kept the engine running to stay warm. When their SUV pulled up, I saw them both glance at my truck and then away with a synchronized little flinch that made me think they'd practiced that too. I didn't get out. I rolled down the window, called, "Hey!" Daniel turned, reluctant. "Let me in," I said. "Not tonight, Dad," he said. "It's late." "It's 6:30. Laura's got a migraine." Behind him, through the curtained front window, the lights looked warmer than the inside of my truck. I thought about the thermostat he wanted to upgrade and smiled. "Okay," I said. "I'll catch you at dinner." "What dinner?" he asked. "The one you're planning." Jack's office downtown wasn't his anymore, but the firm still owed him favors, and favors are the only currency that matters after the checks clear. We met in a conference room with a view of the river, green as an old bottle this time of year. The paralegal's nails clicked like ice as she keyed in names and dates. My handwriting burned all over the document stack. "Revocable trust," Jack said. "You're the trustee. Successor trustee is Carol, if you go. House into trust today. New will, all personal property to charity. Not to punish, to protect. Power of attorney named to Carol. Healthcare directives updated. And this," he tapped a letter. "Notice to vacate if you have to. We'll talk timing." "The locks," I said. "We'll handle it legally," he said. "Do not cut chains like a movie. You're not a movie. You're building a case." I thought of bolts and torque specs and the way a structure fails slow before it fails fast. "Evidence," I said. "Evidence," he echoed. "And Henry?" "Keep your voice low. Judges love fathers who don't shout." In the evenings, I found the house empty when I pulled up. I could tell because Laura had this habit of leaving the downstairs bathroom light on, and Daniel had a habit of turning it off, and the pattern told me when they were home. I'd park down the block and walk past with my hands in my pockets like any neighbor getting air after dinner. Maybe that sounds pathetic to you. It didn't feel that way. It felt like reconnaissance. One night, the place across the street had a package theft. I helped the neighbor pull footage. Turned out, our doorbell camera had caught a clear angle. The neighbor knocked on our door. Laura answered. Voices filtered out. Hers warm, the neighbor grateful. I learned 2 things. The camera worked, and Laura knew how to radiate decency like a space heater. On Friday, I sat in the truck and watched them carry in catering boxes. A ham, foil pans of mac and cheese, a tray of petit fours nobody would eat. Christmas dinner 2.0, scheduled 2 nights early on the 23rd. They were giving themselves a buffer in case the drama got messy. Smart. I called Carol. They're setting the stage. I'm not going, she said. I can't watch them do it. You should go, I said. You should watch. You should watch me. That night, the 3rd twist hit, as if the universe decided we were light on plot. A call from Adult Protective Services. The woman was calm and kind and asked me if I had any support, if I was forgetting to eat, if I'd gotten lost in my own neighborhood. "We received a report," she said. She never said from whom. She didn't have to. I answered her questions. I told her my sister's number, my doctor's name. I gave her Jack's card. When we hung up, I lay back on the couch in my friend's spare apartment. He was traveling through New Year's, and stared at the ceiling until the swirls of the plaster stopped moving. I let the helpless feeling climb my spine, sit on my shoulders, press down. Then I stood up, put on my boots, and walked to the 24-hour diner on the corner, where the waitress called everybody Han, and the coffee was a miracle of civic trust. I ate meatloaf at midnight because meatloaf tastes like choices you can make. Saturday morning, I did something I hadn't done in a year. I went to the VFW Hall on 14th, not because I'm a veteran, I'm not, but because on Saturdays they run a free woodworking class in the back, and I used to help the grandfathers fix wobbly stools. Sawdust hung in the air like winter sunlight. My hands remembered everything. When you glue a joint and clamp it, you have to trust the wood to do its job. Push too fast, and you get a mess. Tom, a Korean War vet with a voice like gravel in a boot, nodded at my face. "You look like a man building a gallows," he said. "Something like that." "Don't forget to build a ladder, too," he said. "You'll need a way down." At noon, my phone buzzed. A message thread screen captured and forwarded to me by a cousin who had always liked Anna more than anybody else. "Laura, we'll be making an announcement tonight because we love Henry and want what's best." A string of hearts. A prayer hands emoji. A little house. Tonight. I called Jack. "Time?" "Time," he said. "You have everything?" "I have everything." "Then, Henry, listen. When he stands up, let him finish." People remember interruptions. They don't remember quiet men who hold a folder. "I know how to hold a folder," I said. "You always did." Dusk blew in early. Chicago's cold, doesn't care what you put on your calendar. I put on my good jacket. Carol met me out front. "You sure?" "I'm sure." Inside, the house looked like a catalog. Laura had moved the runners and swapped in white pillar candles that pooled wax like surrender. The tree glittered without blinking. Guests stood in uncertain clusters. Neighbors, cousins, a few church friends who'd watched me carry Anna's casket, and decided that meant we were theirs, a little bit, forever. Laura hugged people with a close-mouthed smile. Daniel shook hands like a real estate agent. I sat at the far end of the table and placed a plain manila folder under my chair. When my knees touched it, I felt the shape of each document, like Braille. Dinner moved like theater. First act, second act, cue the clink. Daniel stood. "Family," he said. "I know this is unusual, but tonight is about love. We've noticed Dad struggling. He's left the stove on." I smiled into my napkin. "He's misplaced bills. We're worried. We've spoken with professionals." He nodded vaguely toward the back of the room, like there was a panel of experts behind the curtains. "We've decided to step in. For his safety, and the safety of the house. Dad's moving out." "Effective when?" Carol asked, voice cool as an ice tray. "Soon," he said. "We've found a nice senior complex in Oak Park." Laura reached up, touched his fingers, and whispered something that made him beam like she'd just handed him the right line. He looked at me, eyes soft with a pity I wanted to walk across the room and shake off him like snow. "Dad," he said, "we love you." I stood slowly, as if I needed to be careful with my knees. The room quieted in the way rooms do when people are rooting for a scene to go easy. I bent, picked up the folder, and walked around the table until I could meet Daniel on level ground. "Son," I said, A parting gift. He took the folder, lids fluttering a nanosecond like he felt the heat of it. He opened to the first page and read the title line, lips moving. His face changed the way the sky changes when a storm decides to land here and not 3 miles over. "What is this?" he said. "Start with the trust," I said. "That way, you'll understand the rest." The first document was the deed transfer into the revocable trust, with my name in the only place that mattered. Below it, a notarized signature. Not Laura's, not Daniel's, mine. The second document was a letter from my attorney detailing how any attempt to interfere with the property would be met with legal action, civil and criminal. The third, well, a stack of third documents, were bank confirmations of closed access to anyone not named me. The fourth was a list, bullet-pointed and sourced, of debts held by Daniel and Laura, with dates, balances, and notes, in a handwriting the room recognized as mine. The fifth was a transcript of a recorded conversation near the back staircase of this very house, during which Laura explained the guardianship strategy in a tone that might have sounded compassionate if it weren't for the sentence where she said, "We'll say it's for his own good." Daniel's throat made a dry sound. "You recorded?" "I documented," I said. "I'm a builder. We document." He flipped pages the way people flip through a contract they didn't read before they signed the first one. Laura stepped forward and peered over his arm. Her breath sped up. It hit me then, not for the first time, that she was someone's daughter too. Somebody had once cut grapes in half so she wouldn't choke. I let the thought pass. I wasn't here to rescue anyone from the math. "That's private," she said. "No," I said. "That's evidence." Carol reached for the copy I carried in my other hand. Guests leaned in. Shock travels like static in a crowded room. "You lied?" my cousin Aaron asked, looking at Laura. "We didn't lie," Laura said. "We reframed." Jack, from 3 seats down. When had he come in? I hadn't seen him arrive, cleared his throat. "The word you want is defamed." Daniel set the folder down. The pages slid like a deck of cards and scattered in front of the ham. "You can't do this," he said, louder now, veins finding their map along his neck. "You can't evict." "Notice to vacate," I said. 30 days. I didn't want to serve it at Christmas. You chose Christmas. "Where will we go?" he asked, voice cracking on we. "You have a condo you bought last year," I said. "You could try living in the investment." Laura's eyes flashed. "The bank?" "Knows," I said. "They called. Your payment's late. Twice." Guests who had come for pie and story time didn't know where to put their hands. Aaron stepped back from the table like the documents might leave a stain. Carol flipped through the transcript, reading silently. I watched her face again and again choose disbelief, then acceptance, then grief, a loop I'd been living in for months. "I don't understand," Daniel said, but what he meant was, "I didn't think you'd fight back." "You said I was confused," I said. "You set a stage. You invited a crowd. Do you understand how much work it was for me not to spoil your little show?" His chin trembled, and then stiffened. "You raised your voice yesterday in the garage," he said. "You threw a wrench." I laughed. I couldn't help it. "If I throw a wrench," I said, "it hits what I meant to hit." "Henry," Laura said, and for the first time the edge was gone, and a human voice peeked through. "This is going to embarrass us." "It's going to save me," I said. "Those two things can happen at the same time." Jack stood, not with his courtroom voice, but with the soft tone I remembered from the day he met me at the cemetery. "Friends," he said, "I'm an attorney. Everything you're seeing was done legally and cleanly. If you feel uncomfortable, that's your conscience telling you what side you're on." And the room split the way rooms always do. a few to the kitchen, clinking glasses like a sound could return dignity. A few to the hallway, arms crossed, anger their life preserver. A few stayed put, eyes open, faces honest. "Dad," Daniel said, tears bright now. "I didn't mean—" "My name," I said, "is Henry." Silence poured itself over the table. In it, I could hear the hum of the furnace I'd coaxed through each winter by replacing a tiny belt nobody else could find. I could hear my heart, stubborn and steady. I could hear, when I wanted to, Anna's voice telling me to take my time. "When your mother was dying," I said, "you were 28. I asked you to sit with her for an hour so I could shower. You said you had an appointment you couldn't miss. I didn't throw you out then. I should have. I didn't because I remembered you at 8, with a gap in your teeth, apologizing for a scratch on the table. I kept thinking you were still in there. I don't know if you are. But I know this. I'm done letting the 8-year-old you bail out the man you've become." "But we're family," he said. "Family tells the truth," I said. "Family defends, not destroys. Family doesn't lock a father out of his own house in December and then invite a crowd to watch the eviction." Laura opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. "We can undo this," she said. "If you just—" "Go," I said. "Take what's yours. Not the quilt, not the picture frames, not the tools. Take your clothes, take your rings, take the kettle you brought here and the mixer we never used. Take the plant you almost killed and I rescued last spring. Take the rug you roll your yoga mat on. Take the mail. But get out." She stared at me, astonished not that I had the power to say it, but that I meant it. People expect fathers to break. Not like this. Guests moved, chairs scraped. Someone, the neighbor with the package footage, put a hand on my shoulder. Daniel gathered papers with clumsy fingers, and, in the process, read lines he hadn't prepared to see. He stopped mid-scoop, eyes on a paragraph documenting a transfer from my account to his 4 Decembers ago, the amount exactly matching the engagement ring he'd bought for Laura. He looked up at me with the stunned face of a son who remembers being loved. "I wasn't a bad father," I said. "I was a generous one. They're not the same thing." He made a sound that didn't shape into a word. Laura touched his elbow, murmured, "We need to leave." And for once, I agreed with her without arguing a single syllable. In the days that followed, the house settled into the honest kind of quiet. After 30 days, I sold it to a young couple who stood on the porch with mittened hands and eyes like people about to promise each other something that would take work. We walked through each room, and I told them the quirks, the way the second step creaked, the trick to opening the kitchen window, the first floor vent you had to kick twice. I handed them the keys and walked to the truck with my jacket open to the cold, because I needed to feel the air lay claim to me. I rented a 1-bedroom on the 7th floor of a building with a view of the river that looked different every hour. At night, the city lights made a necklace on the water, and I watched it, like a man watches a fire he built with his own hands. I bought a cheap desk and set it in front of the window. I kept Anna's photograph on the bookcase beside a ceramic bowl Daniel had made in 3rd grade. Uneven, glazed a weird blue. I didn't put anything on the walls for a while, not because I didn't have art, but because I wanted to learn what the walls wanted. Sometimes you win, and it feels like a loss. Sometimes you end a story, and the ache doesn't care. On a raw Tuesday in January, I wrote my son a letter. "Daniel, I've been trying to figure out where I went wrong. Maybe it started the first time I said yes when I should have said no. Maybe it started when I kept doing for you so you wouldn't learn to do for yourself. Maybe it started when your mother died, and we both started insisting on easy stories about mercy. I forgive you, not because you deserve it, Because I do. Forgiveness is how I take my hands off your throat and put them back on the steering wheel. Don't write back unless you're done lying. I won't read anything else. Dad. I sealed the envelope and walked it to the blue box on the corner. My breath made clouds. The air smelled like someone starting soup in an apartment I couldn't see. On the walk back, I stopped at the VFW hall and helped a man named Roy glue a split down the center of a table he'd built in 1964. She was Maple, he said, patting it. You can count on Maple. In late February, the couple who'd bought my house sent a postcard. The baby's first steps had been in the hall. They'd found a batch of photographs in the attic that belonged to us if we wanted them. We'll drop them by, I replied, but keep one, the one with the scratch on the table. It's a good scratch. They didn't understand, but they said yes. I like yeses that don't need explanations. On a Sunday in March, I found myself downtown, outside the art museum, staring at a sculpture that was just two massive slabs of steel leaning almost into each other, a breath apart. Everyone around me took pictures. I stood there thinking about forces, gravity, sister forces that pull and push. The way two things can stand upright together until the day one decides it's tired of leaning. Jack met me for coffee on Madison. He spooned sugar like he was calibrating a scale. You look different, he said. I sleep, I said. I cook. I go to a grief group even though it's 3 years late. I learned to make a decent omelet. Did you know if you wait until the butter foams, the eggs don't stick? I know a lot about butter, he said. I know less about suns. Me too, I said. And that was the end of the old part of the conversation we'd been having since December. If you're listening for a neat moral, here's the closest I've got. Love doesn't mean leaving the doors unlocked. Mercy isn't letting someone loot your house with a smile. Forgiveness and boundaries are not opposites. And peace. Peace isn't the feeling you get when everyone else agrees with your story. Peace is what shows up when you stop auditioning for the role of the man your son wants you to be, and start being the man you can sleep with at night. This heart is mine. This house, whatever walls I live within, is mine. It always was. If there's one truth I've learned, it's this. Family is not defined by blood alone. It's defined by respect, sacrifice, and the way we protect each other's dignity. Love without respect rots. Sacrifice without gratitude corrodes. But when you stand for yourself, when you hold your ground with honor, you remind the world that justice and love can live side by side. And if this story touched you, don't stop here. Every story on this channel carries a lesson about family, betrayal, forgiveness, and the courage to rebuild. Stay for the next one. You may find a piece of your own story in it.